Have you considered planting trees on your land? Do you know there are very generous grants available to cover the cost of planting a new woodland and provide an annual income? You can generate an income from diversifying your farm business. Timber is becoming a valuable product. New woodlands can provide shelter for your stock. The carbon sequestered in your new woodland can be sold and provide additional income. Come and talk with us. We are the leading forestry company in Wales. Tilhill can offer support for you to plan a new woodland, access grants, and plant the woodland for you. Please get in touch. Call 01550 721 442 or email inquiries@tilhill.com.
Good morning and thank you for joining us. Our webinar today is part of a series entitled Making Trees Work for You, with a specific focus on Wales. Firstly, my introduction. I'm Tim Liddon, Tilhill's Forestry Director, and it is my pleasure to be your host today. The rural landscape is changing. Brexit, Common Agricultural Policy, government land use initiatives, and capital coronavirus, which does not want to go away. There is also a significantly greater focus on carbon and climate mitigation as well for us to consider. Which of these are threats and which are opportunities is difficult to fathom at times, and one size certainly does not fit all. Through everything though, forestry and woodland remain a steady and loyal partnership option when it comes to providing farmers and landowners with additional income streams. There really has never been a better time to plant trees. I hope this webinar will give you a glimpse of what a woodland can provide and how it can be a good fit for your farm, going hand in hand with vital food production. I also hope it will help you in making informed decisions going forward in order to help secure greater financial security for both you, your family, and your future generations. We have two presenters today who will give you a brief insight into some of the benefits trees can provide and how we, Tilhill, can help you assess the opportunities on your farm, help you to find funding for your project, and then how we can help manage your woodland to ensure you get the very best return from your investment. We will also have a short video on one farmer's choice of diversification. We will have some time for questions and answers at the end, but do feel free to fire those questions in on the Q&A function on screen, and we will endeavour to answer them as best we can once we've heard from our presenters. Our first speaker is David Edwards, our Regional Manager for Wales and Marches. He has enjoyed over 36 years in forestry. David will give you an insight into why he and many of his clients he's worked with think woodlands fit well in farm business plans and guide you through what help there is available to turn the farm woodland into a reality. So, over to David.
Thank you, Tim, and good morning to everyone. Yes, my name is David Edwards, and I'm the Regional Manager for Tilhill in Wales. What I'd like to do during today's presentation is give you a bit of an insight into Welsh Government policy and how that relates to woodland creation, a bit about the financial benefits and the wider benefits that planting trees can bring, and also a discussion on the trees or food debate, and then a bit at the end about diversification. In terms of Welsh Government policy, Welsh Government have declared a climate change emergency, and one of the ways that they're looking to address that and get a zero carbon Wales, or achieve a zero carbon Wales, is by planting trees. We all know, or many of us know, that sequestering carbon dioxide is something that trees are very efficient at. And the other thing about trees sequestering carbon dioxide is that it's a relatively cheap option to some of the other ways of taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So to this end, the Welsh Government have a planting target of 2,000 hectares of new woodland every year, with an ambition to raise this to 4,000 hectares a year. But unfortunately, last year there were only 80 hectares of new woodland created across the whole of Wales. So in response to this, Welsh Government have actually allocated more funds to woodland creation, and as part of the process, the funding scheme within Wales is Glassdeer Woodland Creation. Glassdeer will be familiar to many of you that are farmers, and to enter into the Glassdeer Woodland Creation, you have to enter through a window of opportunity to express an interest. So Welsh Government opened expression of interest round 9 with £8 million of extra funding. That was oversubscribed, we believe, by a factor of about 2, and those that did apply and have been successful should now be receiving contracts. Following on close behind round 9 has come round 10, when Welsh Government have allocated a further £9 million to planting trees. And that window for applications will open on the 16th of November and run through to the 15th of January. So if those of you that have ambitions to plant, now is the time to start planning to get into that expression of interest window round 10. And with the round 10 coming close behind round 9, I think there's a good chance that if you want to plant, that you'll get grant funding this time round. The reasons why people plant trees vary, but to plant at scale, most people are looking for a financial return. Now, whether that's from the ultimate sale of the timber, or freehold sale of the woodland once it's created, or from the ever-emerging carbon market by trading the carbon. If we're growing trees for timber in Wales, then that almost universally means conifers. If we're growing trees where carbon is the objective, then you've got more of a choice in terms of conifers or broadleaves, or a mixture of the two. Just by way of background, the UK imports approximately 80% of its timber requirements, and only China imports more. And to put that into context, the growing conditions in the UK mean that we can grow conifers approximately 4 times faster than they can grow in Scandinavia. This is all good for the growing timber market, because it means we've got a market for our product on our doorstep. And timber is good for the green economy, because timber is a good substitute for the carbon-hungry steel and concrete. As we come to the end of the transition period for Brexit, the implications on the timber trade, I think that in the medium term, that impact is likely to be fairly minimal, given the imbalance in trade that we have with the level of imports. To establish woodland actually requires capital, and with the Glassdeer scheme, and Huw Owen will go on to give you a case study, the initial grants support the capital investment, and once established, then commercial woodland should be truly sustainable. In addition to financial benefits, there are wider benefits and gains to creating new woodland. But in the UK, we have something called the UK Forest Standard. And this ensures that modern forests deliver more than simply just timber. And one of the highlights of the UKFS is that a minimum of 25% of any planting area must be dedicated to conservation or open ground. The remainder of the 75% can be dedicated to commercial crops, and the most significant conifer remains to be Sitka spruce. And the reason it's a favourite is because simply it's the best at what it does. In terms of public goods, sometimes referred to as ecosystem services, I often think that one of the main public goods that woodland creation provides is the provision of rural jobs. If we've got rural jobs, then we're helping sustain our rural community. Creating woodland creates new habitats. It improves biodiversity. It improves water quality and helps control floods. Stabilization of the soils, something else that woodland helps achieve. And some woodlands provide real opportunity for recreation. And in our uplands of Wales, the spectacular landscape that we have is so important to our important tourist industry. On the question of whether we need trees or food, the simple answer is that we need both. We obviously need to eat, and as well as needing all the products that we derive from trees, whether that's construction grade timber or simply toilet roll. Productive forestry doesn't need to be on the best land. Often steep land, bracken slopes, higher elevation areas, or areas that are lacking in water for stock can all grow commercial trees successfully. Marginal agricultural land is often suited to productive tree planting. And planting can actually improve the agricultural productivity of the remainder of the farm. Provides shelter, it can improve options for stock handling, water management on the land, and by developing an area of new woodland, building access, that's actually improving access to the remainder of the farm. Gone are the days when planting trees simply devalued the land. Upland grazing now, with planting approval, has generally increased in value. And the option to diversify the farm business to include a forest enterprise is helped by the provision of grants, which we've mentioned briefly, and Ewan will go into more detail, but they help smooth the transition until the woodland becomes productive and self-sustaining. There is the option for the carbon income, and I would draw your attention to the next webinar that Tilhill is hosting with the initiative of Carbon Store on the 3rd of November, and details should be able to be found on our website. And then there's this option to sell the woodland you've created as a standalone investment at any time. We've had instances where farmers have sold the poorer land on their farm and then used the money to reinvest in the farm business, whether that's buying land or improving the remainder of the land that they've got. Also, to actually sell the whole farm provides an exit route if you're looking for an exit route, in particular, for example, retirement. And that concludes what I have to say. So back to Tim.
Thank you, David. We now have a video interview with a special guest from Huw Owen from Wood Energy Wales, who has taken his farm from an uncertain future in livestock farming to a £2 million timber processing operation. This has involved significant planting on his farm and investment in biomass production. He retains some of the land for hay and haylage and grazing lands. The video is slightly imperfect in places, so please do bear with us. And here's the video.
Hello, we're here today to speak to Huw. I'm Assistant Forest Manager Luke Cross from the Wales and Marches District, and we're going to talk about farm diversification. Brief overview of what you're doing here.
We producing wood chip for biomass customers. We've also got biomass boiler ourselves, and we installed the CHP, which is combined heat and power, which produce electricity for the grid. We used to farm 1,500 head of sheep, and my father farmed about 20,000 laying hens for eggs. Although those two productions, we've ceased both of those productions by now. In the process, we have planted 35 hectares of woodland, which somewhere around 95,000 trees in the process.
Excellent.
2014, February the 4th, we had an open day here with Farming Connect on biomass and this and the other. We had over 200 people on that day, and that was a nice thing to see, but it was a big problem for myself, as in the demand for wood chip quality was there already. We had the business plan done to start off the business or whatever. We anticipated in the first year that we were going to sell about 700 tons of wood chip, and every business plan you pump it to, to the hills to look good. That year we sold in the region about 1,200 to 1,500 tons of wood chip. During that year, the second year, everything increased. We suffered a lot with growing pains, and what I mean is we bought something within 2 weeks, 2 months. It wasn't big enough. It wasn't productive. So we were constantly having to spend more money to try and keep ahead of the game. Luckily, by today, we've stabled out. We ceased farming in 2017.
Completely stopped farming?
We completely stopped farming on the livestock side.
Right, okay.
We rented about 100 acres of land out on a 5-year tenancy. Further to that, we planted 35 hectares on the woodland creation grants.
Okay. What was the reasoning behind that?
To look to the future, to get some trees in the rotation, but mainly the way we have planted, it was on the lowland, and it was a bit prone to flooding in the winter.
Okay.
And then we didn't have enough time with the sheep in March, April when they were lambing, because we were very full on with the biomass.
So what species did you go for on your woodland planting?
We went for the higher grant for, and that was the woodland creation, and it's all the conifers and the hardwood.
Okay.
I'm really pleased to say they went in early January, February, March of 2017, and they have really thrived well.
Right.
Because of the ground condition was ideal for them. They get plenty of moisture there, so they have thrived very well.
Good, good.
In the process, we have bought just under 100 acres of woodland ourselves.
Right.
That was purchased 2 years ago for the biomass supply. But mainly we will buy, before going to that woodland, we will buy standing trees everywhere. By today, we harvest everything out ourselves.
Okay.
So we can harvest out, process it, and deliver it back to customers or whatever. So,
Excellent. And where are you at the moment with your business in terms of, do you have enough machines? How many tons are you delivering out, etc.?
we're happy with the volume that we are delivering out at the moment. With the workforce we've got, 4 full-time employment, plus myself, Carwyn, there's a guy coming into the office every week plus paperwork. So as it is, we're very stable with that side. There's so much you can do in a day, I feel, because I'm very active on the job, and I like to see everybody be happy in their work.
Yeah.
But no, as machinery-wise, there's always something. We've been changing the chipper again this winter, just to take more capacity and more when we cut the trees now, if we're able to take the chipper to the trees, to the forestry, we'd be able to skid the tree as a full tree out, put the tree straight through the chipper, branch and all, brash and all.
Simplify the system.
And there's no brash left on the site there.
Yeah.
In that process, once we've dried the chip, we are able to screen the finest stuff of it and sell it as bedding for dairy farms and whatever.
Okay, yeah.
So we get an alternative product off the timber, off the tree unit.
And is that a electric generator up in here?
Yes, 2 years ago we needed more heat to dry the wood chip for the biomass. So we put 3 installments of CHP, combined heat and power in.
Okay.
So each engine generates, they are rated at 45, but we try and get about 50 kilowatts of electric per hour out of each engine.
Do you sell any of that back to the system?
About 80% of that electric goes back to the grid, national grid. The 20% that we use for the farmers and drying facility and whatever.
A nice little bit of diversification within the business.
Yes, it is. There's a lot of work with that, but again, everybody. I remember the first person telling me about that. First thing you do when you wake up is either put the lamp on, the light on, or you put the kettle on. So you need electric.
That's right. So you mentioned earlier that you weighing down on the farming. Do you still do any at all?
No, we've sold all the sheep out. As it is on the farm, we've got no livestock, but we're renting these 100 acres of land on a 5-year tenancy. We've still got about 40 acres around at home here that we do haylage or hay or silage in the summer, and we sell it on because we still do a bit of contracting work in the summer, and in the winter we get some farmers in with some sheep for that 40 acres of land.
Okay.
Okay, so that was Huw Owen's farm diversification. And just before I introduce the second speaker, I do encourage you to give us some questions. I'm sure David's presentation will have nudged a few questions coming out. So we're looking for a few more questions. We'll now hear from our second speaker, Ewan Parry, Tilhill Area Manager for South Wales and Marches. Ewan is a multi-award winning Chartered Forester and Chairman of the Institute of Chartered Foresters Wales Regional Committee. Ewan and his team manage many hectares of woodland and forest for a broad range of clients. Ewan will take you through some examples of farm woodland projects and how they can work across a diverse range of circumstances. Common to all is how Tilhill has planned, gained approval, secured the grant, and then delivered the quality project. So, over to Ewan.
Diolch, Tim. Dwi yn mynd I roi cyflwyniad byr I chi ynglyn â cynllun glasur a siampl o lle da ni wedi plannu coed. I'm going to give you a presentation now on the Glasgow Woodland Creation Scheme and also an example case study in effect of where an actual farmer has gone ahead and planted a woodland. So before I start, just a little bit about myself. I'm Ewan Parry, I'm a Chartered Forester. My current role is Area Manager for South Wales and Marches. I've been working in forestry now for over 25 years and currently responsible for in the region of 8,000 hectares of woodland in South Wales. We manage all sorts of woodlands as part of Tilhill, predominantly coniferous commercial woodlands, but also broadleaf woodlands and many new plantations of mainly mixed woodlands. Just to give you an idea, in terms of Tilhill, we planted in the region of 2 million trees last year. Gives you an idea of scale of the work that we're at. And also, we in Wales have 20 forest managers, most of which are Glastir woodland creation planners. So, woodland creation always poses lots of questions. Why do we do it? What do we need to do? Where should we be planting the trees? And when do we do it? So hopefully the presentation today that I'm going to give you is going to answer a few of those questions and probably pose a few questions for many of you. So just generally in terms of farm woodlands, what potential benefits can you get from farm woodlands? Well, it's an opportunity to diversify your income, and that's both through grants for establishment and also timber. Farm woodlands can provide shelter, an increase on farm yields. It's been proven that in terms of weight gain in terms of animals with the help of shelter from woodlands can be dramatically increased. Also looking at new markets that they can present in terms of carbon. David's mentioned the carbon market. This is a really new, exciting marketplace which many of you should look into. And new farm woodlands can provide opportunities there. And of course, it's it's going to produce timber and timber products, if not biomass, as we've heard from Huw, but also sawing timber and higher value products. So it has the opportunity to produce that. Every new woodland will increase biodiversity on your farm in many ways, provide opportunities for sporting interest if that's something you're interested in, but also the potential to reduce flooding and prevent soil erosion. So that's just an overview really of the potential benefits of the farm woodland. In terms of the support mechanism that we've got in place in Wales, it's called Glastir Woodland Creation. Many of you would have heard of. That's broken into 4 key grant areas, and those are identified as enhanced mixed woodland, native woodland carbon, native woodland biodiversity, and agroforestry. Each category has a different rate of grant support, and it's important to note that the grant support available does recognise the costs of the specification of each type of woodland planting. Therefore, the higher grants, you should expect higher costs, and the lower grants, you should expect lower costs. In terms of, so that's the capital grant element, and you can see 3,600 for enhanced mixed woodland, 4,500 for carbon, 3,000 for native biodiversity, and 1,600 for agroforestry. On top of the capital grant, which is paid once the woodland is planted, there is potential, if you qualify, for 12 years of maintenance payments. They're mostly £60 per hectare, apart from the agroforestry element, which is £30 per hectare. And then on top of that, there's a woodland creation premium for taking land out of agricultural production, and that's paid at £350 per hectare. And again, that's a 12-year payment if you qualify. And lastly, any fencing required to ensure that the woodland is stock-proof is paid at £3.48. So what I'm going to talk to you about now is a real-life case study. It's a farm in mid-Wales, approximately 500 acres, which is made up of 200 acres of improved land and 300 acres of unimproved hill land. It rises to around about 1,750 feet at its highest point. It already had 15 acres of existing woodland. They were farming 600 improved Welsh ewes and 140 replacement lambs. It's a fairly typical farm in terms of Welsh makeup, and a young family looking to the future and assessing their options. So just give you the photo here gives you an idea in terms of the type of land which we were considering, made up of lots of different vegetation types and soil types, from wet ground to unimproved land, gorse, bracken, different grasslands and so on, and it's situated in a very varied landscape of both upland, grassland, improved, unimproved, woodland, both coniferous and broadleaf woodlands. So the proposal was to plant 120 acres. We were looking at planting 75% conifer, 25% mixed broadleaves, and that was done through the enhanced mixed woodland type of grant. And the initial part of the process was to look to apply for Glassdoor grant. The owners were looking at this as a long-term investment, but they were also mindful of the fact that the scheme was going to provide an annual income for the first 12 years of in the region of £20,000. And we were estimating that there would be very little in terms of the establishment cost, and the grants would look to cover the majority of that. And the whole scheme was to be managed by ourselves at Tilhill. The farmer was not interested or confident in establishing the woodland itself, and obviously needed professionals to do that on his behalf. So stage one of the process is to decide what you want to plant, which fields on the farm, make an assessment, often steep ground or unimproved land, or land which is difficult to get to. And we decided that there was two elements, two areas, main areas that were going to be planted. And the first part of the process is to submit an expression of interest for the Glassdoor Woodland Creation Grant. Important to note now that it has to be done by a woodland agent planner. You will be unable to submit the expression of interest yourselves as landowners due to scheme rules. Once we'd done that, we waited approximately 6 months for the scheme to be given a score, and then the expression of interest was fortunately approved. And then it was the case of starting to plan the woodland. In terms of the woodland planning stage, formulating a management plan which comes up with a scheme, it's a lot about consultation and permissions. And every scheme going through the Glassdoor Woodland Creation Grant has to conform to the stringent guidelines of UK Forest Standard. So the type of elements that we need to look at: acid sensitive water bodies, does the area have priority habitats, do we need to consult neighbours, is there any open access that needs to be maintained, do we have any designated sites within the planting area, are there any more private water supplies, something which is often unknown, do we have utilities crossing the site, is there any common land, is the area covered by historic landscape or deep peat? You know, these are all sorts of different types of considerations that we as woodland planners need to consider and consult. And it's important that this process takes place to ensure that the woodland conforms to the UK Forest Standard. So in this case study, it took about 2 months. We needed to consult about open access, priority habitats, public rights of ways, and historic environment features. And the result of that was that we had to reduce the area by 2 hectares. There was an area of priority habitat which was identified and surveyed, and that was taken out of the scheme. Stage 3, planting design. Obviously, we need to map out in detail the land to be planted and ensure that the areas are correct. Survey the ground and the vegetation, the ground and the soil types, which then helps us decide which species to plant and where. And very important is to ensure that the right species are planted in the right place for success. We surveyed the farm for fencing requirements to ensure that the woodland is to be stock proof, and also to assess what ground preparation techniques we were going to use for the different soil types. Also assessing threats. You need to think about what potentially can cause a threat to the plants, the trees which are being planted, in terms of deer, rabbits, voles, etc. And also, do you have access to the site? So we need to access sites to undertake ground preparation and planting and future management. And we needed to ensure that the access was sufficient and suitable. So what we ended up with was a 48-hectare enhanced mixed woodland. It was made up of 50% Sitka spruce, 15% Douglas fir, 10% Norway spruce, 15% improved birch, and 10% alder. The conifer trees were planted at 2,700 trees to the hectare, and the broadleaves at 2,500 trees to the hectare, so broadly 1.9 to 2 meter spacings. Guards were required, but in the initial scheme, it was only in there as a contingency, and we decided that we were going to assess the risk once the trees were planted, because we felt the level of threat was low enough to do some monitoring, and it turned out that we needed to guard some small areas on the fringes of the site, and we were able to save the cost of guarding the whole plantation. Ground preparation was a combination of ploughing, mounding, and direct planting. Fencing ended up to be 2,200 meters. Capital grant of 180,000, and annual payments of just shy of 20,000. Don't be too concerned about the text in this slide. It's more about the colours, and it just depicts really the process and the complexity involved in establishing a new woodland and the whole process from start to finish. The yellow boxes are all part of the planning process, and as you can see, there's a significant amount of planning involved, from identifying the timings, the budgets, type of trees, through to what to do in terms of replacing dead trees and dealing with any problems. So that's all about the planning of the scheme. The green boxes then to do with the site work, so they depict the site work that's involved. Obviously fencing, ground preparation, tree planting, weed control, site checks, replacing dead trees, and then the brown boxes then depict the involvement as part of the grant process, from doing the expression of interest, creating the plan, getting it approved, and obviously claiming the grants. Now, here's a photo of some of the ploughing, some of the shallow ploughing that took place on site. And ploughing was used to release soil compaction, often the case where land hasn't been ploughed for many years and has been grazed by sheep. There's lots of compaction, and to release that compaction allows the trees to get away very quickly. And we also improved drainage through ground preparation. We undertook some mounding also. It wasn't just ploughing. Some better soils, and to get the trees away as quickly as possible and give them the best possible chance of success. Here's a quick photo of the land just after ground preparation had taken place. And the next photo is 3 years on from that photo. So flip back, and you can see the trees are establishing well. There's been a change in terms of the appearance, and yeah, it's transformed. So in conclusion, we have now established a new woodland. Tilhill ourselves, we've been managing the process from start to finish. We've advised the clients all the way along, and we continue to manage the farm woodland for the landowner. Trees are growing extremely well. The owner is receiving just shy of £20,000 a year, and will do for 12 years. He doesn't spend any time apart from phone calls with myself with regards to updates as to how things are going. He doesn't get involved in any of the practicalities, and has been clear from the outset that he wants the professionals to manage it, and that ensures that he has a woodland which conforms to all the GLASIV requirements, which is an extremely important part of the process. The woodland's soaking up lots of carbon, and we're looking into the potential to sell that carbon in the near future now. And obviously there's a host of new wildlife colonizing on our sites. So in conclusion, really, a few key messages really. Can you talk to the experts? It's really important that you speak to professionals, engage a chartered forester. Make sure that you look at the financial side of things, and ensure you get a proper cash flow prepared in advance. So forestry is a sound investment, and has great returns. It's fairly low risk, and the demand for timber and carbon in the future, I can only see it increasing. So that's my presentation, and I'll hand you back now to Tim.
Thank you for that, Yuan. We now can pick up some of the questions. So if Yuan and David come and join me, thank you very much. So the first question is there a role for natural woodland regeneration, not just planting conifers by simply removing grazing stock? The benefits of biodiversity are significantly higher than planting non-natives. David, do you want to pick that one up?
I suppose the short answer is that yes, there is a role for natural woodland regeneration, often nowadays referred to as rewilding, but it's not something that is grant funded through the Glasgow Woodland Creation programme. The benefits of biodiversity, yeah, okay, they could be more than planting non-natives, but as I said, to comply with UKFS, 25% of any scheme has broadleaves and open ground as a component, and as Ewan showed in his case study, 25% of the area was planted with native broadleaves. So you're actually getting the best of both worlds, in my opinion there.
Okay. The second question is, agroforestry is a fantastic option for farmers to take advantage of and utilise the multi-benefits of trees for their business. What is Tilhill's view on this, and is there an interest shown by landowners and managers for this option, agroforestry? David.
Agroforestry, Bangor University have done quite a lot of research into agroforestry, and they're quite keen on the idea. It's featured on the Archers in recent months. But in terms of actual interest that we've been asked to get involved in, I can't say that I've come across anybody that's asked us to be involved. Not to say that we wouldn't be. If people want to go down the agroforestry route, then growing trees is our business, and if those trees are incorporated into the farmland in agroforestry, there's sometimes a misunderstanding of what is meant by agroforestry, but I understand it to be a mixture of agriculture and trees on the same site. I don't know if Huw Owen has had any further experience of agroforestry.
No, we haven't had any take up of agroforestry, but just to follow on from what David says, Bangor University have done a lot of work in this field, and I know that the Institute of Chartered Foresters had it as a topic of their conference this year. So it definitely has a part to play in land use management, and it's something which probably needs a bit more work and promotion.
Okay, Ewan, I think this is one for yourself. Ground preparation will have a significant effect on release of carbon and be a negative figure detracting from the final figure for carbon units available for sale. Is this taken into account as part of the scheme dependent on objectives, and what alternative could there be to mitigate against ground disturbance?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's careful consideration really that is required when we plan these woodlands. Obviously, ensuring and balancing out the benefits of ground preparation against the release of carbon, and it's an important consideration when planning these woodlands. So it's a very good point. It's an important part of the process, which is why I think you need to ensure that you're engaging professionals to make the correct decisions.
David, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, one of the significant things in terms of ground preparation is what the soil type is. That's going to have a big impact on carbon release to the atmosphere. It's also something that's taken account of in the carbon calculation when you're selling your carbon units. So it is very much, as Ewan says, it's an important factor, but it is fully considered in the whole scale of the operation.
Right. What is the minimum area of woodland planting that Tilhill would consider being involved with? Ewan?
The minimum area within the Glasgow Woodland Creation Scheme is 0.25 hectares, and we'd be happy to listen to anyone with that scale of planting. No problem at all. So there's no, it's just the scheme minimum in effect.
Excellent, excellent. How can the fast rate of wood chip usage be served by the slow rate of rate of woodland growth? Question was really how it appears as though chips were being sold faster than the tree growth.
Yes, which they can't be. You can't sell more than what you've got. And in terms of having a rotation, if you were growing your own plantation or your own forest for wood chip, you in effect would have a proportion that you would fell each year, and you would need the amount of wood chip that you were using in any one year. Then you would need that for the period of the rotation of the crop, if that makes any sense. It's quite a difficult question to answer. You can only chip what you've got, and to keep it sustainable, you've got to chip at a certain level.
What is a priority habitat, Ewan?
Well, it can be things like marshy grasslands, acid grasslands. They are identified as areas which are of importance, although not designated, such as SSSIs or SACs. They are surveyed and considered important in terms of biodiversity. Great,
thanks for that. David, do you have a formula for how you measure the amount of carbon sequestered? Does this differ according to different species?
The answer to both those questions is yes, and I would draw people's attention to the upcoming webinar that we have on the 3rd of November, which is all about carbon. There is something called the Carbon Code, which is specifies how the carbon calculation is done, and that does vary by species, ground preparation techniques, the rate that the trees will grow. So it's a complicated process, and I would ask people to attend the webinar on the 3rd of November, and you get details off our website.
Thanks, David. Huw, is there any financial help available for clearing the land of gorse and bracken in preparation for planting, and can it apply to small parcels of land?
There is no support outside of the capital grants, which I explained, unfortunately. No, you know, it's if it's a process that needs to take place in advance of planting, then potentially it can be covered from the grant available, but there's nothing separate for it.
If we progress to a woodland planting scheme, can we complete some of the work, such as fencing, ourselves to save money? Huw, perhaps you could answer that.
Yes, absolutely. Any of the works can be undertaken by yourselves. Fencing's probably a classic example of when many farmers will undertake the fencing themselves. I think what's important to point out in terms of undertaking any of the work, that there are quite clear and stringent guidelines that Gloucester require you to, standards by which you have to undertake the work, and they will be checked, and there will be spot checks on all schemes which receive grants, and therefore, as long as the work maintains the standard required, then there's no problem.
How is the 25% of the planting area dedicated to conservation monitored? I.e., how do we ensure that this is a maximum benefit for conservation and biodiversity? Huw.
Well, what the scheme rules say is that, it depends on the type of grant. So the 25% relates to the enhanced mixed woodland type, and therefore what that is a minimum of 25% native woodland as part of the overall scheme. Of course, there are the options of the native carbon and the native biodiversity grant options if biodiversity is more of a driver. In terms of monitoring, obviously, you know, they're designed. The type of native woodland is designed according to ground type of area that you're planting. There's no ongoing monitoring of that with regards to the Gloucester grant.
The next question then is written in Welsh, but fortunately equally English. So I'm going to read the latter. How long does it take for the land that's been used for planting coniferous forest to be returned to grazing after being felled?
Once the land is planted, once the woodland is established, it then falls under the Forestry Act, and will be maintained as woodland unless licenses can be applied for any deforestation. But it's unlikely that you're going to get permission to put it back to grassland once it's planted.
Okay. Are the targets for carbon storage and biodiversity in line with each other, or are we searching for a way for them to benefit each other? David, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, they're linked, but not directly, because you can get carbon benefits from the conifer element as well as the broadleaf element, and the broadleaf element is tending to going to be higher in biodiversity than the conifer, whereas we're looking at the woodland as a whole rather than its individual components. So yeah, there's no direct formal link, but the two things benefit each other, if that makes sense.
The next question here is, after 12 years, you can sell the trees onto the market, question mark. What is the ongoing management cost from the case study? Does that come out of the payment?
The 12 years is really there to cover the period of land transformation from what is grassland to woodland. And within 15 years or so, then depending on the type of trees that you planted, but some of the faster growing conifers, we are thinning some of these at years 15, 16, 17 with the new types of spruce that we plant these days, which can provide an income, which is really important. So in terms of ongoing management costs, well, we would discuss that with individuals in terms of the extent of the forest, the woodland, the size of the woodland, and the time involved, really. So that would be on a case-by-case basis.
Next question here is, don't quite understand how or why Tilhill are involved in Glastonbury Woodland Creation Scheme. Do we have a contract to harvest the end crop, but it is public money that has been used to plant? David?
We're involved because that's our business. Planting trees, managing forests, growing trees. That's what we do for a living. That's what pays to feed my kids. There's no long-term contract in terms of what happens to the timber when it matures, or as part of the thinning process.
Huw, how close to the actual cost of preparation and planting are the Glastonbury grants?
I would say in most circumstances the grant is covering the costs. Again, case by case, depends on the land. Steep land is more costly to prepare than flat ground, and different trees cost more than other trees. But on the whole, it's a very generous grant, and in most circumstances will cover the cost.
Okay. For someone planting broadleaves for biodiversity, let's say 2.5 hectares, is it worth ploughing and mounding prior to planting as opposed to digging each in by hand? Huw.
Again, really dependent on soil types and assessment of the site in advance. And it's a balance really between being successful, establishing trees quickly, allowing them to grow and succeed very quickly with ground preparation. But it's not always required. There are circumstances whereby decisions are made not to prepare the ground. And again, by talking with professionals, that can be worked through, and you can be fully informed before you make that decision.
Is there any possibility of financial support for recent planting, such as in the last 2 years, other than the woodland management grants?
There are no existing woodland management grants in Wales. There have been in the past, but now are none at the moment. If it's something very recent and the woodland has been planted and has been registered with woodland carbon code, then there is potential funding through selling carbon, but there are timescales which need to be met. It needs to be registered within the first couple of years, but it's definitely worth looking into if it's a very early planting.
You talked about selling carbon from woodland creation. How much can that add to income, and when does it come in? David?
Yeah, it depends on the situation. As we said before, in terms of the carbon code, calculates what the amount of carbon that your woodland is going to sequester. So that will influence the amount that you have to sell. You can sell at various stages. You can sell at the what they call the pre-issuance units, which is the earliest stage, and then when they're actually verified that they're the level of carbon that is actually being stored that can be sold as carbon units. But again, I would refer to the answer I gave earlier and refer people to our webinar on the 3rd November, when there'll be much more detail on what carbon has to offer for those creating new woodlands.
Right, the last question, I think for yourself, Huw, the Glassdeer summary showed ongoing support of £60 per hectare per year, which doesn't generate £20,000 on 48 hectares. It's the rest based on upon replacement for basic payment scheme income.
The £60 per hectare is the maintenance part of the ongoing support for 12 years, but there is also the £350 per hectare, which is the income foregone. So in effect, you're getting £410 per hectare per year. It's probably worth noting as well, if you're in receipt of single farm payments, that while it's here is still paid on the land that is planted. So whatever you're getting as a single farm payment, that stands while we still receive it.
Right, a couple of questions have just popped up. We'll take these as the last two. Is there an area of land below which woodland planting is simply not profitable? Thinking of small scale planting in particular. Ewan.
I think, you know, every case has its merits. It depends what your expectations are. So small woodlands to provide fuel for a property or a house can be viable. If you're talking more commercial woodlands, investment type plantings, then obviously they need to be larger. And again, it's a matter of speaking to professionals, understanding the requirements, and then matching that by developing a scheme.
Right. Planning and designing schemes is so important, and access is key issue. Where land is difficult with regard to topography or unviable access, would this inhibit the scheme or just affect species planted, productive stroke conservation? Ewan.
I'd be fairly confident that, you know, in most circumstances, access, if it's not there already, can be created. Again, it's part of the planning. It is extremely important that woodlands can be accessed. And in long term, obviously, if they're commercial woodlands, they need to be accessed with larger vehicles. But I would say, you know, again, we're able in the majority of cases to develop access where it doesn't exist.
It's a question of doing the sums. You know, does the scale of the planting justify the access that needs to be put into the site? So it's horses for courses.
Okay, well, thank you both very much. It's very clear that species choice for woodlands is becoming even more important, and the decisions that we make must remain for many years. So it's important to get it right. We need carbon sequestration from species that will thrive in the changing climate. David and Huw have given you a glimpse of how Tilhill can help you get a better understanding of how we design, plan and execute farm woodland creation. Over the years, Tilhill has planted around about 1 billion trees, and we've worked through many grant schemes. We do this as a living and know what we do, and we want you to benefit from our experience. So David Attenborough and Greta Thunberg, two very different generations pushing for tree planting to save our planet. That's a thought to go home with. We will end with a short video on woodland creation. If you would like to discuss further any other topics covered today, please do get in touch. Contact details will be shown at the end of the video and are on our website. The next webinar takes place on the 3rd of November at 10 o'clock and will focus, as we've mentioned, carbon. So watch out for the info on our social media and website. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your questions. Safe travels, even if it's just going to the kitchen to get a cup of coffee. Thank you.
Have you considered planting trees on your land? Do you know there are very generous grants available to cover the cost of planting a new woodland and provide an annual income? You can generate an income from diversifying your farm business. Timber is becoming a valuable product. New woodlands can provide shelter for your stock. The carbon sequestered in your new woodland can be sold and provide additional income. Come and talk with us. We are the leading forestry company in Wales. Tilhill can offer support for you to plan a new woodland, access grants, and plant the woodland for you. Please get in touch. Call 01550 721 442 or email inquiries@tilhill.com.